Okay, so we'll get back to Newegg later when we build our system. But let's head on over to another site called Pcpartpicker.com. This site is just absolutely amazing. It's your best tool to help you recognize incompatibilities with your system. It'll search for parts across different websites to give you the cheapest cost for a particular part. And like I said, you'll find that Newegg will actually have those cheapest parts, but sometimes you'll find that another website will have the part you're looking for at maybe they're running a sale or a mail-in rebate that Newegg isn't doing. So that'll bring up those for you so you don't miss out on those deals. So let's hop on over to Pcpartpicker right now. And where you're going to start, and really the most useful part of this site, in my opinion, is the compatibility checker, right? So the system build, I've already got one started here. So let's remove all these and start over. So these are the different components of a system. We're going to build a system using this feature on their site, so you can see how to build a system and watch out for compatibility problems. So as an example, let's go ahead and choose a motherboard. And I'm going to choose a motherboard that's an AMD motherboard. And I already know what the socket and CPU types are. So I know the FM1 and AM3, those are AMD socket types. So let's just say I choose this one. And we say, looks like I might have to go back. Yeah, let's go back. So I don't know which one that was. So I think I chose one of the AM3. So let's just choose an AM3 socket type. And then we're going to add. This is confusing with the small text, or big text rather. So we're going to click add over here. This adds it to your config, your system build. So now, you see, look at that, the lowest price is Newegg. So now that we've chosen this, if we go and look at the CPU or the processor, you'll notice that all of them are AMD. So it helps, especially newcomers to this, to building new systems like this from scratch. It's a really good tool to not screw yourself over when buying all these parts and not realizing one is not compatible, right? So here we go. Now we have an AMD processor with an AMD motherboard, and if you choose a case, a box for this, this will give you the correct size case. So there are different size motherboards. There's really tiny motherboards. There's really big motherboards. And if you choose a really tiny case for a large motherboard, this site will not let you do that. Okay, and you can absolutely turn off the filter. So if you really want to see all of the items anyway, you can go ahead and click turn off, and you can peruse all of the items as much as you want. Okay, so we've gone through how to prevent yourself from having an issue with compatibility. This site's really good for that. They do have benchmarks here, and we're actually going to look at another site for benchmarks because I don't really think this site does enough of it. They do have benchmarks, but I'll show you another site that actually has a lot more benchmarks and actually has a lot more samples too. Samples meaning a lot more systems are collecting the data. I don't believe that this site has a lot of collection of data, so these may or may not be inaccurate. And plus, there's not enough, in my opinion. There's not enough choice. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next site up on the list. It's actually two sites, and they're both run by a company called Passmark Software. There's Cpubenchmark.net and VideoCardBenchmark.net. And it's an incredibly useful site. when trying to decide on a CPU or video card, because these sites take, like I said, they take benchmark data from thousands of systems across the globe. Folks that use the benchmarking software, they have the option of submitting their benchmarks to Passmark, and then these sites aggregate the data for you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one we're going to use here. That's Cpubenchmark.net. And I will say straight away that there are quite a few different charts here, but to keep your system competitive and to to not have your system considered to be old too quickly, I'd always use the high-end CPU chart. I'm sure the CPUs and the other charts would work fine for your system, but honestly, a lot of them in those are hard to find. Some of them aren't sold anymore, et cetera, et cetera. So to put yourself at ease and to give yourself an easier time, the high-end CPU chart is probably where you want to be. So let's take a look at that real quick here. So as I said, these are benchmarks taken from thousands of machines. Okay, and these numbers are pretty arbitrary when we're looking at it, and all it really is they are numbers that the software sort of spits out as a score. So you're only looking at the scores and you're comparing one score to another. That doesn't really tell you much, right? But because this is the high-end CPU chart, you can guess pretty well that these CPUs will work for whatever you're doing. Unless you're doing some really, really high-end complex, mathematics tasks or research or anything like that, maybe you'd be looking at these ones up here that cost thousands of dollars. But generally, you should not have to spend more than $100 for a CPU for a very broad usage computer. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here is a way to spend as little money as you need to get the most out of the processor that you can. Okay, and there's a little link up here called price performance. So you'll see, and this is a pretty good example of way too much money for what you get. This top processor is almost $7,000, but this is the performance price, dollar per performance ratio here, and it's horrible. It's just way too much money for what you get. So as we scroll down here, you'll notice some of these are, they're getting up there. They're getting pretty good for what you're paying. The lower the cost, the higher they are on the chart. It's pretty good. And here's an AMD one. As I said before, AMD chips are cheaper than Intel for the most part. And I will say that AMD isn't doing that great company-wise. But they're still around. Their chips are still absolutely feasible, as you can see in here. But the last system I built was an AMD, and it's run beautifully for me. It's a little cube gaming computer. So for a budget computer, AMD is my recommendation, and you'll notice that AMD is always the one that gives you the most value, right? So you'll notice that we're getting down in price: 200, 180, 160, 145. If you're looking to say do some gaming on the computer, I wouldn't go too far down this chart. So this one might be a decent deal. You'll pay a little bit more, but we'll talk about what components in your computer should have a higher price tag on them because you need them to perform better for what you're doing. So as an example, this chip would be pretty good for the performance for a gaming computer. Okay, but the first machine we're building is not so much a gaming machine, but more of a general usage machine. So here's an AMD FX. Here's another FX. Now we've gotten below the $100 mark. So right around here, is where I would recommend sort of looking. Here's another under $100 CPU, and you can keep going down farther and farther. But like I said, if you don't go too far, don't go to the next charts. It's a little bit too cheap, and you know the hardware may not be up to spec in the next 2 years or so. Okay, so it's good to stay on this chart. Depending on what you're doing with the system, go farther down, go farther up. If you need a little bit more performance, go up here to where it's almost 200. But in all honesty, I've seen people build these ridiculous, high performance systems. They'll spend $1,000 on a CPU, and they're really just screwing themselves over as far as performance. They're just using the buzzwords of i7 and whatever the latest is, but it's just too much money. It doesn't make any sense. All right, so that's our overview of the Cpubenchmark site. There's also a video card benchmark site. Oops, let's try that again. Video card. Okay. And this is the same company, Passmark Software, same kind of deal. In our case, the first system we're building is not going to have a video card. It's built into the processor. So we're not going to really need to do this. But, if I do end up creating more higher end systems, I would want to come here and again look at the price per performance. And again, there are some crazy price tags here, right? GTX Titan Black, right? $1,280, and I'll tell you, they can make it that price purely because of the Titan name. It sounds big, it sounds awesome, but it's all marketing. You're not making a sound financial decision here. So, gaming systems and gaming video cards. Again, I really don't feel that you need to spend more than $150 or $200 for a really, really awesome video card. And here's a couple examples, right? Radeon. All of the Radeons tend to be lower price for the performance, which I think is great. Radeon cards are great. The drivers for the video cards tend to be a little subpar to NVIDIA, which is what these GeForce ones are. That's my only gripe, but I've had success with both brands. All right, so I think I might be running long with this video. I hope what I've showed is useful to you, and we'll go ahead and move on to our next section of our series here. Thanks for watching.